What's up, welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of Hamnet, the new historical drama film from Chloé Zhao, starring Jessie, Buckley, and Paul Mescal. Chloé Zhao back with her first film since the 1-2 punch of winning Best Picture and Best Director for Nomadland at the Oscars, and then delivering one of the bigger Marvel Cinematic Universe flops in Eternals. And Eternals released already 4 years ago in the fall of 2021. It's been a good 4 years of Chloé Zhao being away, but she's back now and she picked a great movie to return with. Chloé Zhao's Hamnet is a spectacular yet devastating drama film. Zhao adapts the 2020 Maggie O'Farrell fictional novel about William and Agnes Shakespeare grieving the loss of their young son Hamnet. This story is perfect for Chloé Zhao due to her naturalistic filmmaking style. The subject matter so incredibly raw and emotional, fit for an acting showcase, and you get two outstanding performances. Paul Mescal continuing to excel playing a wounded man, as a mother so jubilant at bringing life into the world, and then finding such massive grief when it leaves prematurely. There's a few filmmaking decisions about how they approximate the death of Hamnet that is incredibly powerful imagery, and the final sequence of the film, featuring a Shakespeare play everybody knows, is captivating, heart-wrenching, tearful stuff. It's a really emotional and powerful movie, but I think it just really works kind of across the board. It makes a lot of sense that the film is at the heart of the Best Picture race. Now, backing up a little bit, this film premiered back at Telluride earlier this year, is about to kick off a limited release on November 26th before going wide December 12th, so it'll be getting in front of more and more people as the season keeps going. And the Oscar race is looking like at minimum it will include a Best Picture nomination, a Best Director nomination for Chloé Zhao, a Best Actress nomination for Buckley, seems like she's the favorite at this point, and a Best Actor nomination for Paul Mescal. Chloé Zhao was only the second woman to ever even win Best Director with Nomadland. Getting a second nomination would be pretty historic. Paul Mescal already nominated for After Sun just a few years ago. He's quickly developing a great filmography due to his choices. I mean, he's really only been a film actor for the last 4 or so years, of note anyway, right? Normal People came out in early 2020. It's been a very rapid rise for Mescal, as we know. But Buckley, someone who's been, I think, building over a little bit of a longer tail, this is just by far the biggest performance of her career. Her return as Agnes, someone dubbed a forest witch, someone involved in mysticism, or at least an attention and affinity for the natural world, adept at falconry, for example, right? Her performance feels so unique and lived in and real and fully realized right away as we start the movie. And of course, we're talking about late 1500s English countryside. William Shakespeare is a lowly Latin tutor, right? Still living, with his family. He is not a man of literary prose renown that he would become largely in death. But Will is so captivated instantly at the first glance of Agnes, and they, I think, have a really nicely communicated courtship in the early part of the movie. One note that I thought was amusing is Agnes is going by Agnes Hathaway, her maiden name, later Agnes Shakespeare, but she was also known, actually more commonly known as Anne Shakespeare, aka Anne Hathaway, beforehand. I think they went with the other known name for obvious reasons, but I did not know that there was another famous Anne Hathaway. I thought that was funny. And the way the story progresses, where unsurprisingly, Will and Agnes get pregnant and have their first daughter, but still living with the Shakespeare family. Emily Watson, I think, has a really great turn as a supporting character, in this case, the mother of William Shakespeare. Someone with a more of conservative lean in terms of her family values and her desires for her son and then her sister-in-law later. But as things get darker, as the family gets closer through hardship and tragedy, that character of Mary Shakespeare is able to, and Watson's performance is able to, I think, lend a different side of, tenderness to the film. I really enjoyed her part in, some pretty graphically filmed stuff. Not that it's like graphically nude or bloody or anything, but watching Agnes give birth, in the way they would give birth back in the day, of course, it's pretty harrowing. And another example of Agnes having a desire to do things a different way, right? Choosing to give birth out in the woods the first time around, right? Because that's where she feels more at home and attuned and things like that. And the cinematographer of the film is Chloé Zhao, the Polish cinematographer of recent renown, of course. He did Paweł Pawlikowski's Cold War a few years back, and then recently The Zone of Interest, two films that are absolutely gorgeous but also unique visually. He's a great pair with someone like Chloé Zhao, who, think about Chloe most recently, right? Nomadland and The Rider, even Eternals, someone who has just an affinity for what she wants to capture in terms of the natural world and the sense of place in a really grounded but naturalistic, humanistic way. Frankly, even though Eternals didn't really work out, in the end, it did have a visual language to it, and it is one of the few MCU movies that actually stands out in that regard. And I think she does deserve some credit for being able to make something within that system that stands alone plot-wise. That doesn't really do with her, but has that visual component, directorial authorship, right? Of course, we care about her other movies a lot more than we do Eternals, which, again, didn't really pan out. But all that's on full display. All those talents are on full display with Hamnet. And we take those talents, you take that cinematographer, POV, and you combine it with, this level of like saturation and color grading, you're able to, I think, communicate a lot in relatively modest production design. Yes, we spend some time outside in the countryside, some time in the forest, but largely we're hanging out at the Shakespeare family home in Stratfordshire, Avon, somewhere north of London. And then when we do go to London, primarily with Shakespeare's POV, really only in two locations. So the film's able to communicate a lot with only a handful of true differences in its settings. I think it's a good example of really intelligent movie budgeting, frankly. And despite all this praise for Chloé Zhao and her fit for the material, the success of this adaptation, Buckley's performance, but when the whole range it captures, Paul Mescal continuing to just do the work in a really great way. One of the biggest revelation to me was the performance of Hamnet himself by young Jacoby Jupe, who's now a 12-year-old. So he must have filmed this when he was 11. What a tremendous child performance. I thought he was immediately captivating, immediately tremendous. As a young boy who misses his father when he always goes to London to work, he's never around as much as he should. It's a big aspect of the story, of the conflict between Agnes and William. And Hamnet is able to communicate that disappointment, from a juvenile, a child point of view, but also so charming, so cherubic as a young boy just enjoying time with his twin sister, Judith, and just kind of playing around the house, so innocent, right? And I thought he was really excellent. And then once the tougher stuff happens, when Judith catches some kind of affliction, some kind of plague, as often would happen, in the 16th century, she's seemingly gonna go, right? Has big boils around her neck and things like that. And this is a very, very upsetting scene, right? Watching Agnes toil seemingly futilely to save her daughter, and using a lot of kind of home remedies, again, things in lending itself to her belief system of types of medicine and things like that. And you have Mary's, supportive, stance around them, but you can tell she's a bit more attached to reality and how things are going. And then when it all seems to be lost in the middle of the night, Hamnet goes down to trade places with his twin sister, trick the devil, trick the disease, take him instead, giving his life to his twin. And it's a great play on something we see earlier in the film, where Hamnet and Judith are pretending to be each other, pretending to be twins, and the parents go along with it, much to the chagrin of the older sister, who thinks it's stupid, of course. And then you see such a upsetting flip on that, where Hamnet is able to successfully trick the disease to take his life instead, and Judith miraculously recovers and Hamnet passes away. Again, the upsetting nature of the futile attempt to save Judith's life gets ratcheted up to 10 when they realize Hamnet's dying instead. Really crushing stuff. But what I think was so brilliant about how they communicate this, and this follows us to the end of the movie, is you see young Hamnet, young Jacoby Jupe, standing in an empty room with like painted trees on the wall, and there's like a black doorway, a black void with darkness, nothingness behind it, and you can see his uneasiness, his sadness, his fear about what to do, where he is. Obviously, the approximation of crossing into the void, crossing over, passing away into death, the underworld, all of that. Really difficult imagery to watch, especially in the case of a young child. I thought that was really powerful, and it comes back later at the end. And I mean, the way the film concludes, right, where William returns home, but too late. His son has passed, and that grief carries, and Agnes and William have an even greater wedge between them as they're never around, and he keeps returning back to London as his burgeoning theater company, his burgeoning career is continuing, and trying to make money for his family, but he's not around, and they need his support. They need his physical presence in a troubled, difficult time, right? And you understand all that wedge. And we eventually get a reunion of sorts where Agnes and her brother, who's played by Joel Alwyn, a capable supporting presence from Alwyn, doesn't have a whole lot to really do in the movie, but I think he's perfectly nice in the film. They go to see William Shakespeare's first performance of his new play called Hamlet. And obviously Agnes has her guard up right away due to the obvious nature of the title, but there's word about the film. And what you get is the final sequence happening at the original Globe Theatre, now recreated as the Shakespeare Globe in London today, the old school theatrical building, and its general admission crowd and the like. Really great set. And what you do is you see the first performance of Hamlet, where William himself, Paul Mescal, plays the ghost and gets to communicate and emotionally express some of how he's feeling via the words of the play. And then, in another stroke of brilliance, the actor playing Hamlet, the titular role of the film, of course, is none other than Noah Jupe, the older brother of Jacoby Jupe. Noah Jupe, someone we've known for a long time as a young actor. He's now 20 years old, clearly has a very long career ahead of him, but was around a ton as a young actor, the last 7-8 years already, right? He now looks like an adult and gets to play Hamlet, with blonde dyed hair and it matching Hamnet's hair, and doing the words of the great prose of Shakespeare, right? One of his great and most recognizable plays. And and what that ends up being is it's a catharsis moment for William via expressing how he's feeling in his grief to the world via this work, and then Agnes attending and witnessing it and being able to finally not let go, perhaps, but express some kind of acceptance about what's happened, and perhaps move forward in terms of her memory and her love for her past son, and perhaps it'll bridge the gap with her husband in the future. Of course, the movie ends before we would see anything like that. I thought it was just a really impeccable sequence. I think it was something that you hear the sniffles when you watch the movie. I was lucky enough to see the movie quite early in a crowded screening, and people were feeling it. In that sequence, Agnes, who's got herself up to the front of the stage by now, at one point reaches out and touches Hamlet, touches Noah Jupe. And then the rest of the crowd so moved by what they've witnessed, right? Because the words of William Shakespeare are so brilliant, especially for the people of that time who hadn't heard art in such a way, right? They also all reach out. The whole crowd reaches out, and you can tell how much it moves William watching it from backstage. And yeah, I think it's an excellent film. It's great stuff. I think for me, I have it in my top 5 at the moment. From what I've seen, I think my favorite movies of the year are One Battle, Sinners, Sentimental Value, and Hamnet. In order subject to change, but I think those 4 movies have really risen above everything else I've seen this year. And this is unlike most things I've seen because of how emotional and sad and dark and dreadful it is. But I think it's a really tremendous, execution of such an idea. And maybe shout out to Maggie O'Farrell for writing this book, which I have not read. But gosh, I mean, for a fictional book about the actual life of William Shakespeare, right? Not about his plays, indirectly, really impressive stuff. We haven't gotten too much of like Shakespeare the Man in quite some time. I think that most recently was All Is True, directed by and starring Kenneth Branagh as Shakespeare back in like pre-pandemic, like late 2010s. I think Ian McKellen was in that movie as well. That's like the last thing of note I think of. Of course, Shakespeare adaptations, interpretations of Shakespeare, inspirations by Shakespeare will continue to the end of time because that's how strong the material is. We just got the tragedy of Macbeth from Joel Cohen, a few years back as well on Apple, for example. And there's a cool nod to Macbeth in the beginning of the film where the three kids are pretending to be the witches and like dancing and mouthing the words in the fun witch's voice to the much delight of their father, William Shakespeare. That was a really cool scene. The kid performances again are great. Cool scene, kind of an Easter egg type thing because of course Macbeth was not written, I think, for 25 years after when that's taking place, but it's great. Yeah, good stuff. Jessie Buckley, clearly the favorite for Best Actress. It's been a year of difficult and challenging mother performances at the Oscars this year, between this and Rose Byrne from If I Had Legs I'd Kick You and Jennifer Lawrence from Die My Love. That's a trio of moms going through it movies, but Buckley's clearly at the top here. And Paul, yeah, I mean, this, All of Us Strangers, Normal People, After Sun, History of Sound earlier this fall. He's got a type for the type of roles he does, but, doing something as monumental as portraying William Shakespeare, going through it, an elegant man, trying to express his grief, I think he really delivers. And Zhao crushed again. Can't wait to see what's next for her. She's just a huge talent. And I think after this, the success of Nomadland aside, right, winning Best Picture for Searchlight in the COVID Oscar years, that's one thing already historic in its own right. But now to do this, come back and do this again, gosh, I mean, who knows? Who knows who would say no to her with her next movie? So I'm really excited about this. I'm not expecting much of a box office, right, given the subject matter, right? It's an art film, but it should leg out as well as an adult drama can at this current moment. It should leg out decently throughout the award season. It'll be slow played into that wide release in December and then performing through January, it seems. Let me know, what did you think of Hamnet when you've seen it? What jumped out to you most about this movie? What did you like most about it? What are you thinking for its Oscar chances? Let me know. And for more movie reviews and more Oscar talk when the time comes, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.